Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Tasha Simms here with.
Mark Huron.
You're listening to 100.5 FM in Vancouver, Co-op Radio, Wednesday night, 6 to 7, or you're joining us perhaps live right now on Facebook. Also available as podcast at www. Oh my God, I just had a blip. I went to like three places and and I was ready. I was going, do I know the YouTube channel thing? And I didn't finish that. Consciouslivingradio.org is where the podcast is. Well, that's a first. Okay.
Well, it happens, Tasha. That's the nice thing about being live. It makes you think we're in the studio, right?
Totally. It's just like doing radio, except I miss the studio. I want to get back there. I can't believe since the pandemic, we still haven't gotten back, but we will. Our guest today, I'm excited. We're talking with Edward Tick. He's a PhD, an author, transformational psychotherapist, international activist. He's known for his pioneering work healing wounds of war and violent trauma. He was co-founder and director of the nonprofit Soldier's Heart, Inc., Pentagon-appointed subject matter expert on post-traumatic stress disorder and moral injury. And he's authored numerous books, including the one we're talking about today, Soul Medicine, Healing Through Dream Incubations, Visions, Oracles, and Pilgrimages. His work includes healing from millennium of collective trauma and restoring soul and spirit in our modern world. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you very much, Tasha. Honored to be with you. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. Yeah. Let's dive in. I know you've spent decades studying, implementing ancient healing practices and rituals. Let's start with the roots of Western medicine, psychology, all of it in Greek traditions, except they had a wisdom that also included the soul and invisible forces. So my first question to you is, why do you think we've kind of lost that and become so entrenched in the scientific, the rational, the empirical, and kind of relegated matters of the spirit to some lesser importance? Why do you think that is?
This has actually been, to my best understanding, a 2,000-year, not evolution, but devolution. Before the Greek Enlightenment, what we call the Greek Enlightenment around 400 BC, when reason, logic, rationality came into the world, when science was being developed, and at the same time when Socrates was teaching the meaning of the soul. Until then, there had been a dynamic balance between the rational and the irrational, the personal and the cosmic, and Greek culture had that dynamic balance, including all parts of us for a while, and it was alive in their mythology and their spiritual practices. Once rationality entered our minds and entered culture, and we began analyzing and dissecting the world and the way it works, it really took over such that, Western civilization is profoundly Aristotelian. And what I mean by that is that Socrates was based in the soul. Plato believed in and taught reason and rationality, but believed that the divine powers were larger. Revelation was even more powerful and important than reason, and that we could have direct connection with the cosmos, and that what we in modern psychology call the archetypes were living forces. Plato called them the forms or the ideals. But since that time, and Aristotle inheriting this, Aristotle was profoundly analytic, scientific, rational, and divided the world into all the pieces we actually have today. Our biological system, for example, is what was created by Aristotle. We have been, in order to gain some mastery and control over physical reality, we have been dissecting and analyzing the physical universe for 2,000 years. And spirituality, the imagination, the intuition have been taking secondary places all this time, more and more and more over the millennia, so that we have finally arrived at this place where science and extreme rationality dominate, and we've lost the use of our, our right brain, our intuitive, imaginal faculties, and what some of us believe in and affirm as a living spirituality has been relegated to comic books, to fantasy movies, called our imagination rather than an actual living reality within us.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, our health sciences follow that track. So we've arrived at a place where when we go to a doctor's office, they ask us what our symptoms are and then throw medications at it.
Right.
So rationality and dissecting things has come so far that we don't even look for our holistic, in general, in the mainstream, we don't look for our holistic conditions, but rather just try to erase the symptoms so we can get back to normative functioning, so we can get up in the morning and go to work and function
It's,
in the mainstream. But it doesn't heal. It doesn't.
it's so
cure.
sad. I think it's a sad state because a whole part of us is cut off. We're cut off from something that is so like a life force that's so vital. And imagination is the highway, the superpower, the way, one of the access points is opening to that kind of creativity and intuition. So it's, yeah, I find it, I guess the bad news is we're cut off. The good news is we can open and reconnect. And that's what I hope we can talk a bit about today. So people listening might even have some tools of how they can do this in their own lives. Sound good?
Yes, for sure. That sounds more than good. It sounds wonderful. And all of my work is about reconnecting to the imaginal and to the spiritual, not throwing away science and rationality, but bringing them back into a beautiful dynamic balance.
Right.
We have a left brain and a right brain, or in the Greek tradition, there was both Apollo and Dionysus.
Right.
And we need them both. We need our whole brain. We need to be whole people with all of our faculties, and we can get there.
So how do you define soul, the soul?
How do I define the soul? My simple definition is the drop of the divine in each of us. We can be more complex. We're in the Greek tradition, so Socrates taught that the soul is that in us which differentiates right from wrong, good from evil. It's our moral core. And the soul, it's Socrates' teachings and Jesus's teachings, the soul is that part of us that grows and expands and deepens when we do good, when we do right, when we're compassionate and doing good works in the world, and shrinks, becomes distorted, becomes ill or lost when we do wrong, when we betray ourselves or betray each other. So it's our moral center. It's the drop of divinity within us. It's the way God or the gods speak, are planted within us and speak to us. We're not just mortal beings. We have a drop of the eternal and the divine in us.
And the whole body, mind, soul connection. How do you connect that to trauma in your approach?
I will talk about that. And with all respect, I'm going to expand your question. Most of our colleagues in this work talk about body, mind, soul, or body, mind, spirit. And that's good. That's wonderful. And I want to suggest to our friends out there that it's incomplete. My own fuller definition of holism is body, mind, heart, and soul.
Love
People
it.
without the heart, and body, mind, heart, and soul in community. We're not isolated beings. We need each other. And we suffer when we are cut off from community. So, and that's not enough. Body, mind, heart, soul in community with transcendent purpose.
I love that. That's a good nugget right there. In the book, you say, I'll read this because I loved it. The arts channeled the transpersonal and the unconscious into imagery and community, that artistic performances go far beyond entertainment and are actually sacred rituals. Like that landed for me being in the arts. do you have a favorite ritual, or maybe you could explain a little bit more about how to use the arts, open to the arts, so it can create community, and also if you have a favorite way of doing that?
Thanks. That's a good question, and I'll try both general and particular answer. First, regarding the arts, we assume that and hope that a lot of people in the various healing professions are listening to us, and we hope and trust that many of them use the arts. So I'll talk about the arts in general first. We all have an unconscious. We all dream. The unconscious is multi-layered. So we have the personal unconscious. We have the collective unconscious that draws from each other, from all culture. We have the unconscious goes so deeply that it eventually connects to the universe, and we all are part of everything. The arts are the best forms we have for accessing our deep unconscious imagery that's both personal and collective. And the arts, they're called the humanities or included in the humanities for a good reason, because the humanities in general and the arts in particular really express and nurture and protect our essential human capabilities. And they communicate to us. So the arts are the repositories of our collective cultural images. They pass them through all the generations and around the world between cultures. They pass them to us. And when we are artistically informed, we have much better access to our own inner worlds. We can understand our dreams better. We can understand what troubles us better. We can, and I stress this and strive to encourage people this way, we can understand that the symptoms, our mental health or physical health symptoms that are bothering us are actually images that our souls are creating in an embodied way to try to express the inexpressible, or the whatever about us is challenging or troubling us and wanting expression. So I encourage people, back to the arts. Carl Jung and Rollo May, two great psychologists, both said that the very best training for a future psychologist, psychiatrist, psychotherapist, anybody in the mental health field, is not to study psychology first, but to utterly drench themselves in the arts. Read as much literature as you can. Study poetry and learn how metaphor works. Look at the plastic and the visual arts and absorb the imagery, because it's all our imagery, it's universal imagery. And the more familiar we are with the imagery of the arts and of mythologies of the world, the more readily we will be able to recognize our own symbols, translate our symptoms into usable information, express our longings and our troubles through the arts, and gain release and catharsis from them, and understand what they're trying to say, that they're not just symptoms, they're symbols trying to communicate with us. So the arts are utterly necessary, and unfortunately, I would say too many people not all of us, but many people in the healing professions and the education ignore the arts, ignore the humanities. We know the humanities are disappearing from the colleges. That's a terrible mistake. We can't understand human beings just from the social sciences. We can't get there.
Mm-hmm. I think the beauty of the arts, also, I've never known an artist, anyone I would call an artist, who is not inhabiting their body, meaning they're not in their head evaluating whether it's their painting or their dance or their music. They're actually living it, being it. They're embodied in that precious moment as they're creating whatever it is. And to me, to heal any wound, to evolve, that's a component. People go, oh, well, body, sure, I run. Yes, but it means so much more. It's this cultivating a state of acceptance for the moment, the very present moment, not as a thought, but as a state of being. And when I hear you talk, that's what resurrects for me, is how we all, most of us, need to learn. I certainly needed to learn to rehabit my body. And the arts became the portal to do that, because otherwise you're in your head analyzing, thinking it's not good enough, right? And
Right. Right. Yes, yes, yes. When we're in rationality, analysis is wonderful, helps us manipulate the world and live here well. And it's inadequate to live a complete and holistic life. We need the arts. And yes, and your comment about being embodied, we really don't know how little we do exist in our hearts and our bodies. We're such a hyper rational culture, and the modern world has become so fast-paced and intellectualized and analytic that we don't even know that we're not really here. And the arts,
Right.
and especially the participatory arts, of course, if you're writing, you'd better be feeling it and feel that you're channeling the muse, not just writing analytic nonfiction from your head. Or dancing or painting, any of the arts necessitate deep body presence and pulling us out of our head and into our bodies and into the world.
And
Also,
each other, right?
each
Intimacy with each other. You can't have it if you're in your head. There's a block, there's a barrier, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So, this idea of healing, if we can maybe break it down a little bit more, because I know you're a trauma expert, and I think ancient civilizations, certainly the Greeks, understood that you have to go back to the root that you'd mentioned earlier about how our healthcare system's often just treating symptoms. But this understanding of going back to the root to facilitate healing, I wonder if you could say a bit more about that, and also how it dovetails into our collective wounding and transpersonal connections.
Sure. Thank you. We can more easily understand going back to the root when we do think about how psychotherapy works, that when people come in when people are afflicted and want to see a therapist, if they're not just treating the symptom, which we can put that aside because too much of that goes on, and medications are thrown at the symptoms by the billions, literally billions of pills. So that's not getting to the root. That's just controlling the symptom. This is also ancient Greek wisdom. Plato, way back, taught that most people mistake. Sorry, I tried to remember the exact words. Yeah. Most people mistake the consequences for the causes, which is the same thing as mistaking the symptom for its etiology, for the illness. So even the ancients warned us, don't just look at the symptom or the consequence, but dig down into the cause. What's the cause? Now, when somebody comes for psychotherapy, and if they grew up, for example, in an alcoholic family, well, the therapist will help them understand those family dynamics and how it impacted them as a child and how it shaped and reshaped their personality, their communication patterns, the roles they play with other people. And that's going to the personal cause, to understand it, to deconstruct it, and to redo those patterns. The same thing occurs on a cultural level. So you mentioning, thank you both for recognizing my work with our military and our veterans. That's a perfect example. Okay? We have the terrible wound at epidemic levels called post-traumatic stress disorder. And as you both shared, I have specialized in working with survivors with that wound. That also is considered lifelong chronic disability whose symptoms can be managed for more comfort, but that can't be healed. Well, that's wrong. It can be healed. And I've worked with many people, warriors and others, who have fully healed their PTSD. I translate PTSD in different ways than our common language. Since we use the acronym, I translate it as post-traumatic soul distress,
Wow.
soul distress, and social disorder. And both can be addressed. So not only ancient Greece, but we know of this wound. It's been around for as long as humanity has been around. So it's in the Bible, it's in Greek and Roman mythology. The indigenous cultures of the world knew of this wound, and we know of more than 80 different names it's had. Most of them don't indicate stress disorder, something neurological. Most of the names that it had indicate that it's a comprehensive spiritual wound. And again, cultures around the world and throughout time have had ways for addressing the soul wound that results from trauma. So I've been studying, and ancient Greece is one source, but not the only one. Our Native Americans also had extensive ways for responding to the trauma of combat. We mentioned pilgrimage, and that's in the title of my book. This book is about pilgrimage to Greece, but I also lead pilgrimage to Vietnam. And I take our veterans back and other survivors or their family members back to Vietnam. Surprisingly, and it doesn't match with Western psychology, but there's almost no combat-related post-traumatic stress disorder in Vietnam, even though the war was over there. How is this possible? That the wound is epidemic among our veterans here, but in Vietnam, where the destruction and the death and destruction was so extensive, they don't have this wound. It's because they have so many rituals and spiritual practices in place. They're a communal culture, they're a Buddhist culture, they practice ancestor worship, they believe in animism, so everything is alive, everything has soul and spirit, and everything needs to be worshipped. And we are essentially communal beings, so we need to exist in community. When I went to a remote village to interview one survivor of several years of working on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, I thought I was going to interview one person. The entire village showed up.
Wow.
And they all said, the interviewee and all of them said, well, this is not her story. This is our story. Right. It's his and hers and his and hers. And we are communal people. We don't allow one of our members to fall away and disappear. And the community provides everything that everybody needs. So here in the United States, we struggle to create rap groups and talking stories for our veterans. And it's very difficult. And people think, we don't tell each other our stories. We're a private culture.
Right.
In Vietnam and other communal cultures, Native American cultures, Greek culture, they're a communal culture first. The individual is a part of the group, of the community. And they have been talking about, telling each other their stories and talking about their wounds forever. So we can't get our vets to come into a church or a community center and open up, whereas in Vietnam, they've been doing it for hundreds of years. And that's naturally what you do in a communal culture. In addition to that, there are many, many different spiritual rituals that these different cultures have that provide soul healing that we lack. So back to the original question of how does the spiritual perspective and the mythological perspective help? Why are we working with the archetypes? Okay, digging into the source. Warrior is an archetype. We all have an inner warrior. Some people serve in the military back to our word, to embody the archetype. The warrior always exists in all cultures throughout time and history, but the individual warrior that every culture has is that culture's embodiment and local manifestation of the warrior archetype. So a Native American warrior, an ancient Greek warrior, a samurai, a Japanese samurai, and an American Special Forces veteran And an American Minuteman from the Revolution, it's all the same archetype for that time and place. Okay. Tragically, unfortunately, the warrior archetype has been severely misused and misdirected, misapplied, misused in our American system. The warrior archetype, in its spiritual nature, is essentially a force for preservation and protection, not for aggression, not for attacking and destroying. In the Greek tradition, there were two deities of war. There was Ares, who was the god of war, who was, as Homer said, he's the god who delights in slaughter. He's the berserker. He gets off on it. He just wants to experience the power. And we have that part of us. And some people do go into our military looking to experience that. Really, this is a minority, but some people do say, I enlisted because I wanted to know what it was like to kill somebody. So some people hunger for that much power. The other deity of war in the Greek tradition was Athena. She was a goddess of war, but she was a preserver and a protector. She didn't like war. She was a strategist. She tried to do everything she could to negotiate before entering conflict. And if she had to enter conflict, it was with grief that we have to take life. And the purpose is only preservation and protection, not aggression and domination. So we have those two archetypes. And tragically, in the American experience, when we are invading other countries for their land, for their oil, for their resources, for political power, and it's not really purely necessary defense to preserve and protect human life, whenever we do that, we are in the Ares archetype. The aggressor, the berserker, the killer, and our warriors are conditioned to that, and they're used in those ways. So one of the many ways that I use this imaginally, creatively, artistically in working with warriors, what happened to your warrior archetype? Where are you a servant of Ares or a servant of Athena? And if you feel like you are a servant of Ares, which after most of our wars, that's how our warriors feel, well, then we can work to cleanse and purify that connection, heal the grief you have of it, and transfer. You're never going to be a civilian. Once a warrior, always a warrior. That is always going to be a part of you. The warrior archetype is alive and strong in you, and now we have to develop it and mature it. So you can become a servant of Athena, a servant of protecting civilization. And being a warrior doesn't end when you're out of the military.
Right.
Rather, the warrior archetype is part of you forever. And it's a good, strong part of you if you use it well. And so we keep evolving the warrior archetype so that we nurture our veterans into becoming elder spiritual warriors.
Right.
And they testify to their stories. They come back into society to help and serve others, especially other veterans, especially the younger generations of veterans. They serve in our society. They serve in vast numbers in our first responder forces. They are meant to have use in society. And another way they serve is in all the terrible mass shootings we've had. While civilians are fleeing, the veterans in the crowd often turn around and they protect the civilians and they run into the guns and they'll sacrifice themselves to save the children who are being shot. So we need warriors, and they have protective functions. And when we have healthy warriors, society is actually healthier. But when we have wounded, traumatized warriors who are still in the berserk mode, well, they're still stuck in the combat zone. Their psyches haven't left it. That's post-traumatic soul distress. The soul is still operating as if it's in combat, even when the body has been brought home and we tell them, you're safe, get on with life. They can't.
Right.
So we have extensive teachings, wisdom, and ritual practices for taking the war out of the soul and helping the identity evolve, not to become a civilian, but to become an elder warrior who is continuing to serve and bring healing and wisdom to us.
And this sounds like, although we're talking archetypes, it reminds me of the questions in your book. I think you said they were from Professor Slattery. Is that right?
Yes. Right.
Where the first question is, what god or gods reside in my disease or in my wound or in my suffering and my pain? And
Right.
then can I go through them? Because I found them so helpful.
Oh, sure. And those are good tools for all of our friends listening. Please do.
Mhm. What does the wound want? Actually, can we do it with your story that you just shared? So you already said the archetype in there is the warrior.
Yes.
The god or goddess was both, say it again, Artemis, was it? No.
No, it was Ares is
Ares.
the god of war,
Yeah.
and he is the wounded.
Right, the
traumatized
wounded.
warrior. And then we use Athena as an alternative identity
Right.
and model to evolve toward.
Which would lead us right to the next question. What does the wound want? Well, if you're stuck in Aries, it's going to want something entirely different than if you're opening to the protective qualities of that archetype. Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
And for some of our warriors who are stuck in Aries, we do hear many warriors who are still traumatized, who are crying for revenge,
Right.
or who want to go back and continue the fight. Those warriors are stuck in Aries.
And
Here's a contemporary example of that. I work by Zoom with people in Ukraine. Many of our veterans want to go to Ukraine and fight.
mhm.
Why? And I work with oh my gosh, I have to tell this story quickly. A 78-year-old medical doctor who was a corpsman, a medic in Vietnam, came for an emergency meeting with me because he was trying to sign up and go to Ukraine, and his wife wouldn't let him. You're 78, you can't be in the war zone.
Right.
What was his motivation? Here we are. What does the wound want from you? He and countless veterans say, I want to serve a just cause. Vietnam was not a just war, or Iraq was not a just war. I'm talking about their feelings. I'm not telling anybody what to feel.
Yeah.
But the warrior in me was wounded because I served what I considered to be an unjust cause. The God in me wants goodness, justice, higher purpose. So let me go to Ukraine because I just judge that to be a just cause. And as a warrior, I could serve there. Okay, that sounds sort of right, but you're still going to war and still trying to take life. Is that what the God wants from you? Is that what God wants from you? Oh, I never thought about that. I'm just looking for the good, just cause as a warrior. All right. So the veterans I'm working with are finding other ways to support Ukraine without taking up arms and fighting again.
Mhm.
I can send food. I can send medical supplies. I've been working with them to create a buddy system. I can talk to their warriors to give them guidance and moral support along the way to help them tolerate this horribly traumatizing experience, but I don't have to take up arms and become a servant of Ares again.
Right.
So we change the loyalty. We hear what the wound wants and we change its archetypal manifestation. And when the survivor changes their identity this way, the soul grows and they can carry the experience without collapsing into the wound.
That's amazing. And this applies to disease. It applies to cancer. It applies to any autoimmune disorder, anything that you might be struggling with. You could go through this series of questions and actually enter it, as opposed to trying to get rid of it and fix it. Actually enter it and get the wisdom, allow the wisdom that's inherent in the condition to arise within you.
Yes,
That's what you're saying. Yeah. I find it so profound. The other questions listed there is, what is the story that it poses or proposes? And then what plot wishes to be born through the wound or through the disease? I mean, just by those questions alone, it reframes how we look at our struggles, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, spiritual. It just completely reframes it, because inherent in those questions is there's a positive answer. And if you don't know what it is, you haven't landed in it. That's all, right? As opposed to, yeah.
Right. And our afflictions are actually trying to lead us to that positive answer.
Right.
The
Right.
best way we can respond to our challenges and our afflictions is to realize we're in a labyrinth and we're trying to find our way through. Don't just crush the affliction, because you won't have any direction, but rather try to see the path it's leading you down, see what's not working in your life, what the affliction is trying to say, and follow it, because it's trying to lead you to a different destiny than you're presently living.
Imagine if we all knew that.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, wow.
Really, wow. May I push this a little harder?
Of course. Always push away.
Okay, so back to the Greek tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Our words for psychological healing come from ancient Greece. And this alone gives us direction. In our modern world, in academia and in the general public, we translate psychology as the study of the mind. That's what people learn it is. That's not what the word means or meant in ancient Greece. Psychology, psychiatry, psychotherapy. All of these come from the ancient Greek healing tradition of the healing goddess Asclepius that I'm writing about. These are the origins of medicine and psychology in the Western world. And these are Greek words. So psyche does not mean the mind, it means the soul. Psyche is soul, folks.
Yeah.
Not telling you guys, I'm telling everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Logi, that we say means the study of, and our word logic comes from there. It's not the logical study of the mind. Logi comes from logos. Logos is a beautiful word that's nearly impossible to translate. It means something like the order and meaning of the cosmos. When St. John wrote, "In the beginning was the word was logos. He meant God's word. In the beginning was the creative word that came from the spirit that called the world into being, not our everyday words. So psyche, logos, rather than the study of the mind, how about the order and meaning of the soul? And when we're afflicted, it's disordered, and we're looking for to restore a beautiful and divine inner balance. Likewise, psychiatrist, psychiatros. Iatros means doctor. So literally, a psychiatrist is a soul doctor. No offense to our friends out there.
I wish they were.
Not medication dispensers, not pharmacists, soul doctors.
Yeah.
And psychotherapy, therapeia, meant to serve or to attend. So a psychotherapist, again, literally a servant of your soul.
I love it.
So everybody out there, when you need to consult, think of this and check your psychiatrist out to see if they're talking to you and hearing your soul rather than just dispensing medications to squash your symptoms. When you talk to your psychotherapist, no matter what their letters are after their name, feel if they're talking to your heart and your soul, and including your body and your whole being, not just analyzing with our heads how we ended up in this wounded condition.
That is so profound. I, as a psychotherapist, I was saying that to someone today who told me they'd done couples counseling for 3 years, and no one had asked them about their wounded inner child or their generational ancestry. And I kind of went, well, help me understand, what tools did you walk away? 3 years is a long time.
Yeah.
There wasn't one. And I went, what did you do then in these sessions? Well, we talk. It's always talk, which is again, it's a cognitive and there's nothing wrong with debriefing what you experience emotionally. But as you say, if you're not including the heart, the soul, all of it, you're missing the boat. You're again narrowing the field as opposed to evolving it. So thank you
Yeah.
for saying that. I think that was really clearly put and important. Let's go to dreams. I know we've only got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure we cover a few more areas like dreams and oracles. So you talk about dreams as incubation, and I wonder if you could touch on that and how that's different than how people might think about dream interpretation in our Western culture.
Sure. And thanks for that question. We are affirming the importance of experience over analysis. Analysis comes after the experience. Dream interpretation tends to be very analytic. Let's sit down and you had a dream about whatever last night. You had a dream about a dog. Let's analyze what that dog meant and if it reminds you of a dog you had when you were a child or anything else. In this tradition, well, we don't ask that. What did you experience? How did you feel about the dog? Can you smell it? Could you feel it? And did it lead you anywhere? What was the experience? So dreams are primarily experiential. The brain, the soul, does not differentiate between a dream experience and an awake experience. When we're dreaming, our brains believe we're experiencing. In fact, we are experiencing. I can't even say this correctly. Forgive me. When we're dreaming, it's real experience.
Right.
Our hearts are beating, our energy is burning, we can wake up in sweats, we're moving. So dreams are real experiences. Sorry, I'm losing my place with my enthusiasm. Dream incubation. How is that different from dreaming? So the origins of medicine and psychotherapy, as we said, are in the ancient tradition of Asclepius, the god of healing. For 2,000 years, there were massive, extensive dream healing sanctuaries all over the Mediterranean world. We know of more than 320 that existed from Egypt over to Spain, and from the Caucasus down to Africa, centered in Greece. These were the most perfect holistic healing sanctuaries we could imagine. In fact, our modern sanctuaries like Esalen Institute or Omega Institute, places like that are modeled on them, where all of the healing arts are available. So in Greece, they were all available. Acupressure, psychotherapy, astrology, meditation, tragic theater, nutrition, gymnastics, color therapy, hydrotherapy, art therapy. They were all available and they were applied intensively to all of the patients for free and for as long as they needed. And for everybody, for women as well as men, for slaves as well as emperors, everybody was welcome. Universal healthcare. What do you know? People paid when they left for the healing. But if a slave gave an apple, that was enough, because in the eyes of the divine, they gave what they have. The last practice, though, after the holistic practices, people watched for some kind of dream or vision or message that brought them before the god of healing. And then they did what they call dream incubation, which is going into a sanctuary reserved for nothing else but deep dreaming and lying down on a klinikos. Our word clinic comes from this tradition, and just sleeping, dreaming, fasting, praying for as long as it took, with the community praying around them for support, but not disturbing, for as long as it took until they had what Jung would call a big dream, a dream or a vision in which the divine in some form broke through to them and brought them a healing or told them how to heal themselves. In this tradition, the god of healing Asclepius came to people in their dreams, or some of he had 3 daughters. They were also all healers, and they had their own sanctuaries as well. And his totem animals, especially the snake. And that's where we get the caduceus. But he also had the dog and the rooster were healing totems for him. People had dreams where any of these figures came to them and healed them in the dream. And really, Scouts honor, they woke up healed. So there's some miraculous healings, or they were given remedies that told them how to heal themselves. We have more than 1,000 testimonies from the ancient world that have been translated into German and English and major languages of the world, where we can read the way these healings actually happened. It wasn't only in the Asclepian tradition, but things like a warrior, back to the warriors, a warrior who had an arrow point in his shoulder, and it was deep and inoperable. With human surgery, would go to sleep in an Asclepian temple, go through dream incubation, have a dream. These are real stories. I'm not making this up. This is a testimony. Had a dream where in the dream, the healing god Asclepius came and operated on the shoulder and took out the projectile, and woke up in the morning and his body had expelled it without surgery. And modern people could have dream healings as well. Do we have enough time? I'll tell a quick story of my own.
Go for it. We've got maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, quickly then. I was teaching this to an adult education class. I had a doctor in the class who was rather rational and said, these are good stories, but they're myths. They come from the mythological tradition. Not true. People's wishful thinking, people's superstition. How can we prove such a thing? Okay. I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome in my 20s. When I went home thinking about how can we demonstrate to this doctor that this can still work in the modern world? Between that class and the next class next week, I had a dream where in the dream I saw a tall figure with gray hair and a gray beard, dressed in a toga, carrying a snake-wrapped staff, came up to me while I was sleeping in my bed in the dream and stood next to me and said, I hear you've been calling me and asking for help, and I've come to give it. In the dream, I said, oh yes, thank you for hearing me. I have the IBS and I don't know what to do about it, and medicine says you can't do anything. I control it with diet, but help. And the figure said, or the Asclepius in my dream said, I've come to give you a remedy. I want you to take an enema made of lemon juice and vinegar, and take that enema and it will clean out your bowels and heal you so that your digestion works correctly. Next day, I called the doctor and I told him I had this dream. He said, I've never heard anything like that, but you got to do it. Now you're the lab rat. You got to do it and report to our class what happened. My only suggestion is that you dilute the vinegar and lemon juice so you don't burn yourself, because this is heavy acid. Okay. So that also made me question, why do I need acid? Well, because I have too many toxins and life it's like a homeopathic remedy. I was feeling caustic, acidic, rotting from world stress. And so taking a dose of the acid from the other end actually burned off a lot of the accumulated toxins that I've had for years or decades of life. And I felt the most extraordinarily alive, wonderful, beautiful glow of life and energy. And I was flooded with joy that showed that I cleaned all kinds of pollution out of my system, and pure aliveness and joy could break through again. So, and then I went back to the doctor and to the class and I reported that, and happy to say he came to Greece with me the next year. Study
cool
this
doctor. Cool doctor.
Yeah, cool doctor. And he actually changed. He had been a radiologist. He still was, but he also became a medical philosopher. and did some very
Love it.
good research and writing in holistic healing. So
That's great. That's a
cool
great
doctor.
story. I
Yeah.
love that.
And it shows that it works in the modern world and can work for us. So we can incubate ourselves for our,
Sorry, go ahead.
well, we can use this ritual. I do run dream incubations when I lead pilgrimages to Greece. And my book is full of stories of people's incubations, their dreams during that time, and how they've brought transformation. But we can incubate ourselves.
Right.
Fast, pray, take time off, turn off your electronics, though we need them and want them for communication like this. But get off your cell phone, wake up slowly in the morning, don't rush off to work, write down your dreams.
Right.
Before you go to sleep, meditate on what you're looking for, set intentions, write a note to yourself and to the divine and put it under your pillow. And stay there until you get a dream or a vision that gives you some life guidance. And give yourself that kind of personal dream incubation retreat. This works also.
I love it. So we've got to wrap up here, but really, listeners, if you're intrigued by this, you've got to get the book. Again, it's called Soul Medicine, Healing Through Dream Incubation, Visions, Oracles, and Pilgrimage. We didn't even get to oracles, which I love working with too. But it's all in the book. And so tell us what you've got coming up, just to entice our listeners. Any workshops, events, or pilgrimages you want them to know
yes,
about?
thank you. I'm actually leading my next pilgrimage to Greece is at the end of the very last week of March. So there's information on my website. So pilgrimages, yes. I've got a lot of events coming up. Thank you very much for your attention to this book. I have others. So people can go to my website and see the list of events. So I'm giving a lot of lectures and workshops, including even by Zoom, distant dream incubation workshops, where even on Zoom, over a couple of days, we can go through this process together, study it deeply, and then we incubate ourselves overnight and come back the next day and work with the dreams. So I have all of that going on, and I'm writing another book on Greece. I'm happy to.
Love it. Love it. We're going to have all these links. Make sure Mark's got them because he puts them up on the website, consciousliving.org, and all your information, your website and everything else can be accessed through there. It's really been a pleasure. I love this topic, all these topics around healing. And I love it feels so inclusive and powerful to me. And I'm reminded really quickly of a story in your book. I think it was with, I think his name was Jim. He was a chaplain, a veteran chaplain, and you took him to Vietnam. So he had already done deep psychological work, and his recurring dream around the bear, he had tracked to his father and his childhood. So like the psychological all made sense, but he still was suffering. And so I loved how your story, when he went on pilgrimage with you and you just kept including bear and all the other things that bear is from a sense of mythology and as a totem animal, and how that brought about healing. So I guess I want to say to the listeners that, there's even if you get one angle, there's something about this inclusivity of opening to the bigger, the transpersonal, the mythology of it all, and the collective that is so profound. And that's what you bring to the table. So thank you for your work.
You're very welcome, Tasha, and thank you for the way you use it and for honoring it. And for all of our listeners, water your archetypes. Water them. Let them grow. Let them guide you, and they will. They're living beings that are beyond us and live through us. So feed them and water them. Follow them.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. You've been listening to Conscious Living Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver, Co-op Radio, Wednesday nights, 6 to 7. I'm Tasha Simms. And
I'm here, Mark Caron. I'm still here.
There you are with your angel wings, kind of.
I don't know, that was awesome. I really love what you're saying, Dr. Ed, about trauma, and then, the root of the words and what those really mean. And you touched on so many things I believe in when it comes down to, modern psychology therapy, because we still have these problems, and it's such a, so pervasive in our society and culture these days that we
Yes.
need to find the way to navigate this so that we can just live a more happier, joy-filled life, you know?
Yes, and it's possible.
And we're all doing it. Let's do it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
There are millions of us like this little crowd who are trying to do what's right and good and bring spirit back. So we're not alone. And oh my goodness, the world needs this struggle. So we're in tune with, we talked about warriors. We're in tune with the battle of our age.
Mhm.